The dock smelled like salt and rust, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes and never washes out. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and tried not to think about how empty my wallet was. I'd lost my last job 2 weeks ago. Office work. I was never built for it, but I'd pushed papers around long enough to fool myself that it would last. It didn't. And when you're a man who's better with his hands than with his head, the options shrink fast. That's how I ended up here, walking the pier at dusk, staring at ships that looked as beat up as I felt. One boat stood out, not because it was new, it wasn't. Its paint was peeling, the name on the side half faded, but it sat steady against the tide, as if the sea itself respected it. A man leaned on the rail, smoking a cigarette. Old, wiry, the kind of man who had lived longer than his body should have let him. "You looking for work?" he asked without turning. "Yeah," I said. My voice cracked. I hated how desperate I sounded. The man finally faced me. His eyes were pale, washed-out blue, like water left too long in a bucket. "Name's Captain Riley. Got room for another hand. Pays decent. Hard work. Long nights." I swallowed. "How decent?" He named a figure, enough to make me forget how tired I was, enough to keep the bills off my kitchen table for another month. "I'll take it," I said too quickly. Riley studied me for a moment, then flicked his cigarette into the sea. "Then there's something you need to understand. My boat runs on more than diesel and nets. Out here, the sea makes rules of its own." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. The edges were frayed, like it had been passed down for years. "What's this?" I asked. "Your lifeline," he said simply. "Read it. Follow it. Don't ask questions. If you can do that, you'll come back with pay in your pocket and your skin still on your bones." I let out a nervous laugh. "They're just superstitions, right?" Riley's face didn't move. "Call them what you like, but break them and you'll find out why they're written down." I slipped the paper into my jacket. My hands were shaking. Behind him, a couple of the crew hauled crates aboard. They looked rough but not unfriendly, already half drunk on cheap rum. One waved at me. "Fresh meat," he called. "Don't worry, you'll learn fast." Their laughter carried over the waves, but it didn't sound cruel. It sounded like men trying to forget where they were headed. As the sky turned from orange to black, Riley clapped a hand on my shoulder. His grip was stronger than I expected. "Be ready." "We leave at dawn." I nodded, but the truth was, I barely slept that night. In the rented room above a bar, I unfolded a paper and read by the flickering light of a single bulb. The rules were written in careful, deliberate script, each one numbered, each one short. The first line made me pause. Rule 1. Never look into the water between 1 and 2 a.m. I frowned. What the hell was that supposed to mean? By the time I finished reading, the bulb had gone out. I lay awake in the dark, clutching that piece of paper like it could explain itself. I told myself it was just old sailor superstition, the kind of nonsense men invented to scare rookies. But part of me, the part that knew I didn't have any other choice, wondered if I'd just agreed to something I couldn't walk away from. The first day on the boat was almost normal. Hard work, sure. My back ached from hauling nets, and my hands were already raw from rope burns. But there was a rhythm to it. The men laughed, cursed, drank, and sang. For a while, I almost forgot that folded paper in my pocket. By nightfall, the deck smelled of salt, sweat, and cheap liquor. A lantern swung from a beam, casting long shadows across the wooden planks. The men sat in a rough circle, passing a bottle between them. "Not bad for your first day," one of them said, a broad-shouldered man named Harris. He shoved the bottle toward me. "Here, warm you up." I took a sip. It burned all the way down. "Thanks." Another, a wiry guy with a crooked nose they called Finn, chuckled. "Don't thank him, that's swill." The men roared with laughter. I forced a smile. After a while, the conversation drifted to women, money, and fish big enough to capsize a boat. I leaned back against the rail, letting their voices wash over me. Then Harris nudged me. "You read the rules yet?" I hesitated. Yeah, didn't make much sense. The laughter died down. Finn leaned in, his face lit half in shadow. "They'll make sense soon enough. Trust me." Captain Riley hadn't joined us. He sat alone at the stern, smoking in silence, staring into the waves. By midnight, the bottle was nearly empty. My eyelids felt heavy. I muttered a good night and stumbled below deck, into the cramped cabin that smelled of damp wood and old blankets. Sleep came quick, but at 1:10 a.m. I woke. At first I thought it was a dream, a voice, distant but sharp, echoing over the water. "Help! Please! Somebody!" My eyes snapped open. I sat up, heart pounding. The voice came again, closer this time. "Over here! I can't hold on!" I shoved off the blanket and ran to the deck. The night air hit me like ice. The lanterns swung in the breeze, casting frantic streaks of light across the dark sea. Several of the men were already there, leaning over the rail. "Damn fool went overboard," Harris muttered. His knuckles were white on the railing. In the water, a figure thrashed, arms flailing, voice raw with panic. "Please, don't let me drown!" My gut clenched. I moved to climb over the side, but Finn grabbed my arm. "Don't." "He's drowning!" I shouted. Finn's face was pale. "Look at the time." I followed his gaze. The clock mounted near the wheel showed 1:25. My blood ran cold. The first rule. "Rule 1, Finn whispered. "Never look into the water between 1 and 2. "That's insane." I yanked my arm free. "He's right there." The figure's face broke the surface. For a split second, lantern light caught it. Bloated, pale, lips torn from salt. His eyes rolled white, yet his mouth screamed my name. "Jack! Jack, help me." My knees buckled. He knew my name. Before I could think, I leaned over the rail. Cold, wet fingers shot up and clamped around my hand. They were wrong, too long, too strong. I screamed and tried to pull back. "Get him off!" Harris roared. 3 men lunged, hauling me backward. My body slammed onto the deck. The fingers slipped free, but not before something tore across my hand. Pain seared through me. I clutched my left hand and saw blood spilling down my palm. One finger, my index, was shredded. The nail ripped clean off. Bone glinted under the lantern light. I screamed again, this time in pain. The men circled me, their faces grim. Harris pressed a rag to my hand. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Could have taken the whole hand." "What the hell was that?" I gasped. No one answered. The voice still carried over the waves, but it no longer sounded human. The words stretched too long, syllables snapping like ropes under strain. "Jack! Jack!" Captain Riley appeared then, moving with slow, deliberate steps. He didn't look at me. He looked at the water. "You broke Rule 1, he said flatly. I didn't mean to." "You looked," Riley cut me off. His voice was calm, almost tired. "And it nearly took you." The men fell silent. Even the sea seemed to hush. Finally, Riley flicked his cigarette into the black water. "Get below deck. All of you. Let the sea have what it wants." No one argued. They scattered like frightened children, leaving me clutching my bleeding hand. Back in the cabin, Harris helped me wrap it in bandages. My whole body shook. "It was him," I whispered. "It was our crewmate. He was screaming for help." Harris's eyes darkened. "No, it wasn't him. Not anymore." I lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sea lap against the hull. Every so often, I swore I heard my name ripple through the water. When dawn finally broke, one bunk was empty. No one spoke of it, and I didn't dare ask. The morning after felt wrong. The sky was bright, the sea calm, but no one spoke of what had happened. One bunk was empty, and yet the crew carried on as though he'd never been there. Nets were thrown, ropes hauled, fish gutted. I worked in silence, my bandaged hand throbbing. Every time I looked at it, I saw that pale, bloated face in the water, the one that had called my name. By evening, the unease sat heavy on me. Laughter returned in bits and pieces, but it was thin, brittle. Even Harris, who had been quick to joke, kept his voice low. After dinner, I found myself sitting near the bow, staring at the horizon. The folded paper of rules burned in my pocket. I took it out, smoothing the creases with my thumb. Rule 2. If the engines stop, hide in the cabins until they start again. I frowned. Engines didn't just stop. And if they did, wouldn't it make more sense to check them, fix them? I folded the paper again and shoved it away. Sailor superstition, I told myself. But after last night, even that lie didn't settle right. The night air grew colder. We'd turned off most of the deck lights to save fuel, leaving only a lantern swaying near the wheel. The sea was black glass around us. I was below deck, halfway to sleep when it happened. The low, steady rumble of the engines cut out. Just like that, 1 second there, the next gone. The silence was deafening. Then I heard the scramble, boots pounding against wood, doors slamming. Men rushing past my cabin, their voices sharp with urgency. "Below! Now! Move it!" I jumped up, stumbling into the corridor. Harris barreled past me, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" "Get inside, Jack." I blinked. "The engines, shouldn't someone—" "Cabin. Now," he barked, shoving me back. I stumbled inside and slammed the door. My pulse hammered in my ears. For a few seconds there was nothing, just silence. Then came the sound. It started as a low scrape, like metal against wood. Then footsteps, heavy, wet. Each one echoed across the deck, deliberate, patient. Something was up there, walking where no one should be. I pressed myself against the door, holding my breath. The steps drew closer, slow, dragging, then stopped. A long creak followed, as though weight leaned against the hatch just above me. I dared a glance at the small porthole. At first nothing, just darkness. Then something moved past the glass, not a face, not exactly, more like a pale smear, a shape half-formed, too close to see clearly. My chest tightened. I fell back, covering the porthole with a blanket. The footsteps resumed. This time they were joined by another sound, wet dragging, as if something heavy and slick was being pulled across the planks. The smell hit next. Rot. Old fish and seaweed, thick enough to gag me. Voices whispered above the noise. Not words, not fully, but murmurs, bubbling, gurgling, like something trying to speak underwater. I clamped my hands over my ears. My bandaged finger throbbed as if it remembered those hands pulling at me. Minutes stretched like hours. The footsteps roamed the deck, pausing here and there as though searching. My door rattled once, gently, like a hand testing the handle. Then came the sound of wood tearing, a crate being opened. Another, and then silence again. Just as sudden as it had stopped, the engines roared back to life. The vibrations shook through the hull, familiar and grounding. And just like that, the footsteps were gone. I stayed in my cabin, shaking, until Finn banged on the door. "It's clear. Out you come." I opened it cautiously. The men were already on deck, their faces pale. A couple crates lay open, the contents gone. "What happened?" I asked. Riley stood near the wheel, his expression flat. "The sea took its due." "What does that even mean?" My voice cracked. Harris gave me a look, tired and grim. "It means we get to keep fishing." As if on cue, the nets groaned with weight. The morning haul was richer than the day before, the fish almost leaping into our hands. The men muttered thanks under their breath, small prayers I didn't understand. I stared at the empty crates, my stomach twisting. We'd paid some kind of price, but what kind of debt was I signing on to? That night as I lay awake, I thought I heard the footsteps again. Not above this time, but below, echoing in the hollow of the hull. The third night came with fog. It rolled in heavy and thick, clinging to the rails, smothering the horizon until sea and sky were the same endless grey. The lantern light barely reached a few feet beyond the deck before dissolving into nothing. I hated it. Every sound carried differently in fog. Every creak of the boards, every flap of canvas, every groan of rope seemed magnified, distorted. It made the boat feel smaller, like the world had closed in. After dinner, I sat near the bow, the rules open in my lap. My finger traced down to the next line. Rule 3. Never answer a voice that comes from the sea. I frowned. A voice from the sea, I muttered. What the hell did that mean? Harris overheard me. He was sharpening a knife nearby, his movements steady, deliberate. It means exactly what it says, he said without looking up. That's not an explanation, I shot back. He glanced at me then, eyes tired, face lined. You'll understand soon enough. Just remember, if you hear it, keep your damn mouth shut. The knife rasped against stone. Shh, shh, shh. I nodded, but the words sat wrong in my stomach. Later, after the others turned in, I lay awake in my bunk, staring at the ceiling. The boat swayed gently, the timbers groaning. My hand still throbbed where the finger had been torn, the phantom ache keeping me restless. At some point I drifted, not fully asleep, not awake, that half place where dreams feel real. And then I heard it. A voice, soft at first, muffled, like someone calling from far away. It rose with the swell of the waves, each word carried on water. Jack, my breath caught. My mother's voice. I shot upright, heart hammering. The cabin was dark, the other men snoring softly. Again the voice, closer. Jack, sweetheart, help me. I shook my head hard, palms pressed to my ears. Number, it couldn't be. She'd been gone since I was a kid. Cancer took her before I'd even finished high school. But the voice was hers. Every inflection, every tone, perfect. The way she used to call me in for dinner when I was late from the yard. I stumbled to the porthole and peered out. Nothing but fog, nothing but the soft lap of water against the hull. Please, the voice whispered. I'm cold. Let me in. My throat tightened. My lips moved before I could stop them. Mom? The words slipped out, fragile, barely audible, and the sea answered. A sudden spray shot through the porthole, sharp and salty, striking my face. It burned my eyes, filled my mouth with brine. I gagged, coughing, choking as though I'd swallowed half the ocean. My knees hit the floor. The others woke at my hacking. Harris cursed and yanked me up, slamming the porthole shut. Damn it, Jack! What did you say? I didn't. My chest heaved. You answered it, didn't you? His eyes blazed. I coughed up seawater onto the floorboards, the taste of salt sharp and bitter. I thought it was her. Harris shoved me against the wall, his face inches from mine. It's never them. Do you understand? Never. The whole cabin was awake now, men glaring, muttering. Finn shook his head. He's green. He doesn't get it yet. Captain Riley appeared in the doorway, silent as ever. He looked down at the puddle of seawater on the floor, then at me. You answered, he said. Not a question. A statement. I opened my mouth, but he raised a hand. Don't. Next time it won't just choke you. Next time it drags you under. The silence after his words was worse than shouting. He turned and left, the men following, muttering curses under their breath. Soon only Harris lingered. He crouched down, voice low. Listen to me, Jack. The sea knows things. It remembers. It can use the voices of the ones you miss. That's how it gets you. I closed my eyes, tears stinging. Why me? Because you're new. Because you're weak right now. It tests you. He stood, adjusting his knife on his belt. But if you want to live, you don't give it a damn syllable, ever again. When he left, I sat in the dark, shaking, the salt sting still burning my throat. I could still hear it, faint and low, beneath the groan of the hull. Jack, sweetheart, come home. I curled into my bunk, pulling the blanket over my head, and prayed for morning. But even when dawn came, the voice hadn't stopped. It had just sunk deeper, as if waiting for another chance. The fourth night began with laughter. Not mine. The crew had settled into their usual circle after dinner, passing a dented bottle of rum between them, the fumes thick enough to burn the air. Harris was halfway through a story about a woman he'd met in some foreign port, exaggerating every detail until even Finn was doubled over, slapping the deck in amusement. I tried to laugh along, but my throat still burned from seawater. Every swallow reminded me of the voice that had worn my mother's tone. Harris noticed my silence. "Don't sulk, Greenhorn," he said, nudging me with the bottle. "Drink. Helps keep the sea out of your head." I shook my head. "No thanks." "Suit yourself," he said, taking another pull. Captain Riley sat apart as always. He never joined the circle, never laughed, just smoked and stared into the waves. Sometimes I wondered if he ever slept. As the night stretched on, the stories slowed. Laughter softened into murmurs, men's eyes glassy with liquor and fatigue. One by one, they peeled off toward their bunks, until only Harris and Finn remained, arguing over a game of cards. I wandered toward the stern, the folded paper of rules heavy in my pocket. I unfolded it again, tracing the next line with a finger. Rule 4. When the ship's bell rings at night without wind, never go on deck. I stared at it for a long time. Out of all the rules, this one seemed the vaguest. What did the bell have to do with anything? Bells didn't ring by themselves. But then, engines didn't stop by themselves either, and men didn't scream my name from the sea with voices they shouldn't have. I shoved the paper away and leaned on the rail, the ocean stretching into blackness. The fog had lifted, leaving the stars sharp above us, countless and cold. Harris joined me, cards still in his hand. "You look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered. He tapped his bandaged knuckles against the rail. "Listen. The bell, it's no joke. If it rings, you stay put. Don't even crack a door." "Why? What is it?" He glanced at me, then away, jaw tight. "You don't want to know. Just remember this. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see, it's not for us. The bell's a warning. Treat it that way." Before I could press him further, Finn called him back, waving the cards. Harris sighed and left me alone with the waves. Eventually, I retreated below deck. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, wood and salt. I stretched out in my bunk, listening to the creak of the hull. Sleep came slow. My mind replayed every sound, every whisper. The more I told myself not to think about the rules, the louder they echoed. Sometime after midnight, I drifted. And then the bell rang. 3 sharp peals, clear, hollow. I bolted upright. My first thought was storm, but the sea was calm. No wind rattled the rigging, no swell rocked the boat. Still the bell rang. Once more. The cabin exploded into chaos. Men sat up, faces pale. Harris was already on his feet. "Below! Nobody leaves." "What is it?" I demanded, my heart hammering. "Shut your mouth and stay put," Harris snapped. Finn yanked the lantern down, snuffing the flame with a twist of cloth. Darkness swallowed us whole. The only light came faint and distant from the cracks in the hatch above. We sat in silence, breath shallow, bodies tense. Then came the footsteps. Slow, heavy, wet. They creaked across the deck above us, each one deliberate, like someone dragging soaked boots across wood. But it wasn't boots. The rhythm was wrong, too slow, too uneven. The air grew damp, thick with the stink of algae and rot. My stomach turned. Something scraped against the hatch. A wet hand or something close to it dragged across the wood, nails squealing. Beside me, Harris's hand clamped on my shoulder. His grip was iron. "Don't move," he whispered. I didn't breathe. The footsteps circled, paused. Then another sound joined them, dripping. A steady trickle of water spilling across the planks. Then a voice, low, raspy. Not words, at least not any I recognized, but it carried the rhythm of speech, bubbling and guttural, like someone trying to talk with lungs full of seawater. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound seemed to bypass them, crawling straight into my skull. Every instinct screamed to open the hatch, to look, to see. My hand twitched toward the handle. Harris crushed it in his grip. "Don't." The bell rang again, one sharp note that rattled the beams, and then silence. The footsteps stopped, the dripping ceased. We waited, frozen, for what felt like hours. No one moved, no one dared. Finally, Captain Riley's voice drifted from the dark. "Stay put. Till sunrise." So we did. We sat in that suffocating dark, the air heavy with fear, until the first grey light seeped through the cracks. When we finally emerged, the deck was slick with seawater. Small puddles gathered near the hatch, though no storm had touched us. And on the rail, clear as day, were handprints. Pale, webbed, too large to be human. No one spoke. The men simply cleaned the deck, swabbing away the prints as if erasing them would erase the night itself. Harris caught my eye as he worked. "Now you know." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I didn't ask, I didn't want to know. But as I scrubbed the boards, the smell lingered, thick and foul, and I knew one thing for certain. Whatever had walked our deck, it hadn't come from this world. The fifth night tasted like metal. It was in the air, in the water that steamed off the stove, in the tang of my own tongue. The boat had a way of making everything feel used. That was the word Harris had for it, as if the sea had already been through us once and decided to try again. I paced the length of the deck until Captain Riley told me to sit down or go below, because my footsteps were making the wood think too hard. I went below. The cabin light wobbled. Everyone moved slower, like men who had been awake for weeks instead of days. Finn sat cross-legged on his bunk, carefully stitching a tear in his sleeve. Harris sharpened his knife in slow, even strokes that made me think of a metronome. The others dozed with their mouths open, the kind of sleep that isn't rest so much as shutting down. I took out the paper. The edges had gone soft from being folded and unfolded. One more rule remained. Rule 5. If someone on board speaks with a drowned man's voice, do not answer. The ink might as well have been carved in bone. I was the first to break the silence. "What does it sound like?" My throat felt tight even before I asked. Harris didn't look up from his blade. "You'll know." "That's not an answer." Finn's needle flashed. "You think rules are written because people understood everything? They're written because someone didn't and lived long enough to write it down." I folded the paper and slid it back into my pocket, where it felt like a stone. We ate quietly that night. Stew that tasted like the inside of a can and bread that tasted like a locker. Men avoided one another's eyes. Riley did his rounds, touching wood here and there, the way religious people touch the shoulder of a friend after a prayer. When he passed me, his eyes caught mine. "You've learned," he said. I swallowed. "I'm trying." Trying is what keeps you breathing. He turned away, then paused. And listening keeps you from answering. He went up again. I lay in my bunk, fully dressed, boots on, the paper in my pocket heavy as a promise. My hands wouldn't stop flexing, the bandage on my finger had stiffened with blood. I told myself I'd made all my mistakes already. I told myself I could keep my mouth shut. Sometime past midnight, the engines found a rhythm and settled. The boat sighed with the water. I drifted in the way exhausted men drift, a slow sinking into the kind of blackness that isn't sleep but surrender. A voice pulled me from it. "Jack?" I sat up so fast the bunk groaned. The cabin was a low field of breathing shapes. The lantern threw a weak cone of yellow on the floorboards. The voice had not come from the corridor, nor from above. It had come from the bunk across from mine. "Jack," it said again. It was wrong and right at the same time, right the way a photograph can be right, from a distance, from the memory of features, but wrong in the way it fails to move like a face, fails to be warm. It was a voice I knew the way I knew my own hands in the dark. High school parking lots, grease under nails, a laugh like a snapped guitar string. My best friend, dead on a winter road, was speaking from a man who wasn't him. I fixed my eyes on the knot in the board at my feet. "I hear you," I whispered inside my skull where it wouldn't count. I made my lips stay closed. Across from me, the shape shifted, sat up. The bunk springs protested. Harris's knife rasp fell silent. Finn's needle stopped. "Jack?" the voice said, and this time it was stronger. "Man, you look like hell." The man wearing the voice was a crewman named Dole. Solid, quiet, the kind who did his work and kept his food. Dole had a voice like gravel, a captain's rock when tempers ran high. This was not Dole. This was my friend laid over his bones. I stared at the knot. The old wood had wound itself into an eye over years of pressure, a tiny whirl of darkness in a world of grain. If I looked away, the boat would look back. "You're gonna act like you don't hear me," it said. The smile was easy to hear. It had always been easy to hear. "That's cold." Beside me, Finn slid off his bunk and put his feet on the floor quietly. His hand found my shoulder and squeezed once, warning, sympathy, both. Harris started to hum under his breath, a low, no melody that kept the air occupied. Men pretend not to hear things because acknowledging them gives them shape. The thing in Dole's bunk moved again, wood whispering under weight. "You remember the lake?" it said. "The canoe we didn't steal?" A laugh snorted from someone's nose, too sharp, not meant. A boot thumped the wall. Harris stopped humming just long enough to hiss, "Shut it." "You remember," the voice said, softer now, so I had to lean toward the knot to keep from leaning toward the sound. "You remember how the sky looked like a bruise when the sun went down? You said bruises mean healing. I said bruises mean you got hit." My chest clenched. We were 16 again, and everything hurt the way it hurts when you don't know yet which pain will stay. I bit the inside of my cheek until metal washed across my tongue. "Come on," the drowned voice coaxed. "Say something. Just a word. Let me know you're still in there." The rules had been simple when they were in ink. They were less simple now that they had learned my name. Dole's shape stood up. He unfolded into the low light like a memory climbing out of a frame. The voice moved with him, not coming from him exactly, but attached to him like a second shadow. The closer he got, the more the room smelled like old rain in the carpet of a closed-up house. He stopped at the end of my bunk. I could see his boots in my peripheral vision, wet, though none of us had been on deck. Salt left little white flowers on the lever. He exhaled and the air cooled a degree. "Look at me," the voice said gently. "I've been trying to find you, man." The first rule I had ever broken had taken a finger from me. The third had tried to drown me with my mother's voice in its mouth. I had learned. The voice leaned closer, softer still. "Jack," it said, "please." My eyes wanted to run up my face. I pinned them down with the weight of the knot. I discovered the knot had its own country of detail, a ridge like a hill, a dark crescent like a harbor, a line where someone had once dragged something sharp across it. I made a map of it. I stayed in the map. "Fine," it said, and the gentleness scraped off like paint. The next breath that rolled across my cheek smelled of old fish and pennies. "Play it hard. You always did think that made you a man." Something cold brushed my wrist. I flinched. A whisper went through the room, bed springs and breaths. The touch left behind a wetness that felt like a kiss the ocean would give a body it planned to keep. The footsteps that followed were soft, but the water they left behind was not. They marked the boards, a constellation of dark that dripped into little lakes between planks. "Hey, Harris," the voice said brightly, as if it had turned its head to grin. "You still owe me a game." Harris didn't lift his eyes. "You ain't playing me," he said. His voice was steady, only because there were men who needed it to be. "Get back in your bunk and sleep." "You'll play," it said, the cheer clipping off the ends of words like a knife. "Everyone plays eventually." It took another step. And another. It paced the aisle the way men pace when they've found a power they intend to test. It paused near Finn. "How about you, Needle Boy?" The drowned voice wore an accent it never had when the original man was alive, as if it were trying dialects on like coats at a thrift store. "You could stitch me a new coat." The old one's heavy Finn held his breath so carefully I almost didn't hear it. His needle lay still on the blanket. The drowned voice giggled. Hearing that laugh with that sentence arranged something crooked behind my ribs. The door to the corridor opened without a sound. Captain Riley filled it like a habit, a man-shaped wedge against everything that wanted to get in. He didn't bring a lamp. He didn't need one. Men turned toward him the way needles turn toward distances they can't see. "Dole," the captain said, not Dole's voice, Riley's voice, captain voice. "Back to bed." The drowned voice sighed. "He hasn't said it yet." "No one will," Riley said. "Not tonight." "You don't get to decide that," it sang, cheerful as a drunk. "The sea decides." "The sea taught you the song. Sing it with me. Go on, sing." Riley took one step into the room. It shouldn't have made the air warmer, but it did. "Back to bed." The drowned voice smiled through Dole's mouth. I could hear it stretch. "Make me." For the first time since I had climbed aboard, I saw the captain's face change. Not anger, not fear, something else. A tired kind of pity, the way men look at a fire that thinks it is a sun. He didn't move toward Dole, he moved toward me. He stopped at my bunk, close enough that his sleeve brushed my knee. In the soft light, his eyes had the color of milk. "Jack," he said in a voice pitched only for me, "you're going to breathe in through your nose and out through your teeth, and you are not going to speak." My jaw hurt already. I nodded. The nod traveled through my neck like a stone rolling down a glass. "Good," he said. He looked at the knot in the board and put his palm flat on the floor next to it. "Count the rings." I blinked. The knot had them, circles, tight as coins, proof that time could be pictured if you cut the right place open. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My finger twitched with each, a child learning numbers by touching them. Behind us, the drowned voice tisked, a teacher disappointed in unteachable students. "He'll talk sooner or later, they always do." "Not tonight," Riley repeated. Movement. A shadow slid across the wall like a low wave. The smell drew close. The coins, the old meat of things that have lain too long. The voice leaned in near my ear. "You ever think it was your fault?" The rings tripled in my vision. 7, 8, 9. "You were supposed to drive that night. You had the keys." I shut my eyes. The rings floated under my lids like jellyfish. 10, 11. "You were the one who said one more drink." 12, 13. "Look at me," it said. A coax, a command, a curse. Riley's hand came down lightly on the back of mine. Not a squeeze, the presence of a weight. "Count," he said. 14, 15, 16. "You don't even visit my mother," it said, and for the first time the voice faltered. It found a new edge to drag against. "What a friend." The ache in my teeth crawled into my ears. I let the hurt pass through. I let everything pass through. If pain is a wave, it goes somewhere if you let it. If you catch it, it knocks you down and drags you out where the light can't follow. "Say something," it pleaded suddenly, all the masks sloughing off for a heartbeat. "Say anything, please. I'm so cold." Riley's hand left mine. The space he left behind was instruction. I did not answer. The room waited the way water waits when wind stops. The drowned voice stood bent over me, empty mouth moving in an owner it did not belong to. Then it straightened. "Fine," it said. "Fine." The cheer had returned. "Plenty more on board." It walked away, not toward its bunk, toward the door. Riley did not move to block it. He stepped aside. Men who understand the sea know there are doors you don't put your body in. The drowned voice reached the threshold and paused. It turned back, head tilted, the way dogs tilt when they hear a pitch inside the walls. "Good to see you, Jack," it said in a perfect braid of friendship and threat. Dole's boots carried it out into the corridor, past the ladder to the deck. The sound of them receded. Then the ship itself seemed to take a breath. The lamps flickered. Somewhere above, something small fell and rolled, a little tin sound out of place. No one moved for a long time. Riley finally let out his own breath, a sound like a leak found and patched. "Harris," he said, "watch the door." Harris slid off his bunk and took the place where the drowned voice had stood minutes before. He didn't draw his knife. He didn't need to. He had the kind of hands that can turn a storm back by offering it a cigarette and a stare. "Finn," Riley said, "with me." They left. The corridor swallowed them. The air lifted a fraction, like pressure easing on an ear. Finn returned first. His eyes were harder than when they had gone. He sat down and picked up his needle and didn't put the thread through it right away. Riley came back later, slower. He closed the door with 2 fingers and looked at each man in turn. When his eyes reached me, something like approval moved through them and was gone. "Sleep," he said, "as much as you can." No one asked where Dole was. No one asked if we would see him in the morning. The rules teach men which questions are ghosts. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling. The knot had closed its eye. The rings hid inside the plank. My jaw ached. My tongue throbbed where my teeth had printed it. In the lull between engines' turns, the sea spoke its endless language to the hull, and for the first time in nights, I didn't try to understand any of it. I didn't sleep, but I also didn't answer. When morning came, a thread of grey through the porthole, the slap of water a brighter colour than black, Dole's bunk was empty. His blanket lay folded, neat as a made bed in a house that hasn't been lived in for years. No one spoke. Finn lit the stove. Harris poured coffee and put a chipped cup in my hand without looking at me. I took it, and the heat went through my fingers to the place where bone had once glinted in lantern light. Riley stood in the doorway for a long time, the boat rocking around him like a promise. "You did well," he said finally. I nodded. The coffee tasted like rope. "He's gone." The captain didn't blink. "The sea keeps what answers it." We went to work. Nets, ropes. The day's weight landed on our shoulders, and we bent the way men bend when they don't break. When the sun pulled itself up to a height that made shadows short and truth look possible again, I found the paper in my pocket and unfolded it one last time. The rules were the same as they had been days ago. Ink doesn't change, men do. I traced the last line with my thumb until the oil from my skin smudged the loop of a letter. Then I folded the paper small enough to tuck under the inside flap of my bandage and let it live there, against the pulse. I had learned. The rules were teeth, and some of them were mine. Morning came slow, a grey light bleeding over the water until the world looked drained of colour. The nets went out, the men worked in silence, and no one mentioned the empty bunk where Dole should have been. By noon, the boat turned back toward port. The engines hummed steady, as if nothing strange had ever touched them. I sat near the stern, my bandaged hand heavy in my lap, watching the shoreline inch closer. When the dock finally came into view, something inside me loosened. Land, solid, unmoving. It felt like I hadn't seen it in years. Captain Riley called me to his cabin. The air inside smelled of tobacco and salt. He sat behind a small wooden desk, an envelope resting on the surface. "You lasted," he said simply. I lowered myself into the chair opposite him, exhaustion pulling at my bones. "Barely." He slid the envelope across the desk. "Your pay." As agreed, I picked it up. The weight was more than I expected. I thought of my wife's face, of bills piled on the kitchen table, of food in the fridge again. Relief spread through me, sharp and almost painful. Still, guilt sat heavy. I didn't follow everything perfectly. I looked when I shouldn't have. I answered when I shouldn't have. I almost ruined it for everyone. Riley lit a cigarette, the tip flaring red. He blew smoke toward the ceiling before speaking. No one gets through their first trip clean. Not one. The rules are there because men fail. The ones who learn fast enough get another day. The ones who don't. He tapped ash into a tin can. The sea keeps them. I swallowed. So I did well? You survived, he said, his eyes pale as worn glass fixed on me. That's all that matters. I looked down at the envelope again. Survived. The word sounded thin. He leaned back, studying me. You'll be back. Men always are. Good pay, steady work. And once you've seen what waits out there, nothing else feels quite as real. I shook my head quickly. I don't think so. I have what I need. That's enough. Riley didn't argue. He just smiled, thin and knowing. We'll see. When I stepped off the boat, the dock swayed under my feet. My legs felt wrong, like they still expected the deck's rhythm. Harris clapped me on the shoulder as he passed, his knife at his belt, his eyes unreadable. Finn gave me the smallest nod, thread still looped around his fingers. Then they were gone, back to work, back to sea. I stood alone, envelope clutched in my hand, and tried to breathe air that didn't smell of rot or salt. It should have been over. I should have felt free. But as I walked down the pier, past rusted barrels and coils of rope, I heard it. Soft, familiar, too close. Jack. I froze. The voice curled around me like fog. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, sliding under the crash of waves and the cry of gulls. I told myself it was the wind, just the wind. I didn't look back. I held the envelope tighter and kept walking, the boards creaking beneath my boots. Each step took me closer to home, closer to my family, closer to the life I thought I wanted. But deep down I knew the truth. The sea doesn't forget, and it doesn't let go. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. This is Midnight Jack, wishing you a safe night.